May 27, 1943. 850 miles south of Oahu, somewhere in the vast, unforgiving Pacific. A flat blue that swallows sound and time. The sky's thin and hard at 10,000 feet. The ocean below looks from above like a sheet of hammered glass. In the belly of a consolidated B-24 Liberator, the hum of 4 engines is a second rhythm to the breath of the men who live by disciplines and checklist. They call this particular airplane the Green Hornet. The men call each other by rank and by habit, names clipped to fit the cadence of war. Lieutenant Louis Zamperini, Bombardier. Capturers Russell Phillips, pilot, Staff Sergeant Francis McNamara, tail gunner, and 7 more faces, eyes trained on instruments, radios, and the invisible seam between life and disaster. You're there with them, the smell of engine oil and hot metal, the taste of recycled air, the weight of a .50 caliber gun in your hands if you're a gunner, the soft rattle of oxygen masks when the plane lists. Louis straps into his bombardier's position with the practiced movements of an athlete who learned rhythm on the track and discipline in uniform. He is a second lieutenant now, not the boy who ran in Berlin, but his sinew remembers speed and pain alike. Around him the men murmur coordinates, exchange cigarette-light nods, check flares, and the small, precious tins of Hershey D rations that everyone keeps like talismans. The mission is a search for a lost B-25 that failed to return, and the mood is taut but routine. Then a clack in the engines turns to cough, then to a rattling backbeat of failing pistons. One engine falters, a second follows. The controls tighten like a fist. Someone shouts. The pilot fights trim and torque. The Liberator, heavy with fuel and crew, begins to list. The sky is a panicked quiet. Instruments flicker. The world contracts to metal and decision. There is no dramatic explosion, only the slow betrayal of mechanics and altitude. Turbines losing bite, airspeed bleeding away. Phillips calls the order to abandon. For men trained to trust instruments and leaders, seconds stretch to a thin, terrible clarity. Harnesses unbuckle, boots find torn canvas aisles. The tail gunner counts the men as they go. Louis's world narrows to the frame of a shattered window, the slap of the Pacific wind, and a single impossible thought. I will not go into that cold without fighting. When the Green Hornet finally gives up, it does so with the inevitability of an animal surrendering to exhaustion. Metal kisses sea. The impact is a physical having to, a wrenching that rips breath from ribs, splinters the fuselage, and converts air into a weight that pins men to their stations. Louis is thrown forward, slammed against the bombardier's plexiglass. He tastes salt and grease. For a moment, he is blind to anything but pressure, the world a slurry of blood, oil, sky, and the high, screaming ring in his ears. Then buoyancy. Not mercy, but the stubborn physics of fabric and air. And he finds himself in water, lungs burning, grabbing at floating wreckage. Shock is a cruel selective editor. Louis remembers the ring he always wore, the Trojan ring from USC, catching on twisted metal. That ring, improbably, becomes a pry point, a handhold, a hinge between drowning and survival. He claws out of the wreck, coughing seawater and shouting into winds that take his voice and shred it. Around him, the ocean is a litter of bodies and straps, of life rafts steaming unpredictably as the sun beats down. The men configure themselves into 2 rafts. The sea spits out 3 survivors and, somewhere beneath the boiling surface, 8 who will not come up again. The first minutes are a raw calculus. They salvage what they can, a flare pistol, a brittle pack of cigarettes, tins of water, a few ration bars. Someone has a pistol with a single shot. Someone else has the presence of mind to open a fresh raft, to lash them together with parachute cord. Equipment, a pocket compass, a smattering of fishing line, a broken sextant, becomes more precious than a notional victory. Louis's hands work with the focused calm of a man who once measured meters and seconds. Wrap, lash, stabilize. The sun is merciless. The Pacific already begins to strip color from the men's faces. Lips split, salt caked on brows. They eat what they must. The first day is a triumph of improvisation and stubborn hunger. A small, audacious albatross, its wing keening like a ghost, is seized and gutted and cooked on a smolder of canvas. Its feathers become tinder, its meat a miracle. They sling fish hooks from spare wire, bait them with scrap, and learn the cold lesson of ocean hunger. Fish come and go like other lives, and sometimes sharks come close enough to feel the raft itself as a curiosity. The tail gunner, Mac, uses an oar to fend off a black shadow the size of a small boat that glides beneath the surface and brushes their thighs. Each night, the ocean changes tone, a long, soft roll that becomes a bruise in the dark. And with the dark comes the weight of being alone inside a world that never ends. Rain is salvation and cruelty both. When clouds pass over, they supply a drip of fresh water collected into lids and cupped palms. When they do not, thirst carves into thought. Lips crack, tongues swell, words slow. The rations are measured like a ritual. The flare pistol is sacred, for rescue or for suicide, depending on the curvature of despair that an exhausted man holds in his chest. Louis hears the names of men who will not see the next dawn spoken in small, ritualized prayers. He sees the pilot, Russell, try to keep morale with clipped commands and jokes that hang on the skeleton of their faces. He watches Mac, pragmatic and blunt, like a man who measures luck the way he measures ammunition. Days pass, not as a calendar, but as a tightening coil of sensations. The sting of salt-cracking skin, the metallic tang of fear that laces every bite, the high, incessant sound of circling gulls, the sudden, terrible roar of engines overhead that may be friend or enemy. Once, a Japanese bomber rakes them with machine gun fire, puncturing the raft and turning a night into a frantic ballet of plugs and pressure. The men patch and bail and do not stop trembling until daylight settles like a benediction on their faces. Louis's mind works in strips. Memories of the 1936 lapse, of running a mile in sand, of the small stubborn pride that carried him from USC to uniform. Those memories are utility now. A runner's refusal to stop becomes a raft of its own. He paces an invisible circumference on the tiny patch of canvas, humming under his breath, flexing muscles that the sea wants to let go. He keeps watches, counts rotations of the sun, keeps his hands moving so they do not forget coordination. He prays when he can, curses when he must, and when silence is all there is, he listens for sound cues. A gull's cry, the slap of a wave, the click of parachute cord under stress. On the 47th day, after storms and sharks, after the slow funerals of eaten tins and a crewmate's body pushed over the rail, after hope has been rationed down to the size of a coin, a shape appears on the watery horizon, a small, foreign hull moving with the deliberate indifference of a patrol vessel. The men on the raft are shadows of themselves when they are hauled aboard by rough hands and surrounded by eyes that see in them not men but enemy property. The Pacific that saved them through its buoyant mercy now delivers them into chains. And Louis, who fell into the ocean with no parachute, will learn that survival is not yet the end of the story. The Japanese sailors haul the survivors aboard like salvage, their faces hard and impassive, the smell of diesel and gun oil thick in the air. The men are barely recognizable as human, ribs showing through sunburnt skin, eyes buried in sockets, lips cracked into bleeding seams. The first bucket of water thrown over them feels like both baptism and punishment. Louis Zamperini, who once sprinted in Olympic white under the Berlin sun, now lies curled on the deck of an enemy vessel, the iron tang of rust and salt thick in his mouth. Hands seize his wrists, binding them behind his back with coarse rope. His legs tremble, not from fear but exhaustion. Around him, the sea rocks the ship with an indifferent rhythm, as though it neither knows nor cares who lives and who dies upon it. Russell Phillips lies nearby, breathing shallowly. Mac stares at the planks, eyes vacant. They are prisoners now, cargo. The Japanese guards speak little, their commands sharp as whip cracks. The survivors are shoved below deck into a compartment that smells of rot and human waste. The air is heavy, the temperature unbearable. Every breath feels like inhaling through wet cloth. Louis's thoughts flicker between clarity and hallucination. The sound of stadium crowds, his mother's face at the breakfast table in Torrance, California, the way the ocean's horizon once seemed endless and free. Hours pass, then days with almost no food. Just a ladle of rice water and a few crumbs of moldy biscuit. When they are finally brought topside again, it's not for mercy. The sailors force them to kneel in rows as the captain inspects them, his uniform immaculate, his eyes cold. He speaks through an interpreter, questions about their unit, their base, their aircraft. Louis answers only with his name, rank, and serial number. The captain's expression does not change. He raises a hand. A sailor steps forward and strikes Louis hard across the face with an open palm. Once, twice, 3 times. The blows are precise, almost ritualistic. Louis's ears ring. His mouth fills with blood, but he does not speak another word. He remembers the Olympic code, the training, the pride. He also remembers something older, the defiance of a boy who once outran police sirens for sport. Days later, they are transferred again. This time to a base at Kwajalein, the small atoll already infamous among Allied airmen as Execution Island. The rumor, whispered in mess halls and among bomber crews, is that no captured airman leaves it alive. The prisoners are paraded through the camp barefoot, their uniforms shredded, their bodies little more than silhouettes of hunger and bone. A sign greets them at the gate, neat brush strokes in Japanese characters, impossible to read but heavy with menace. Beyond it, a cage of bamboo and barbed wire. The guards mock them, throwing handfuls of sand and laughing as they crawl through the entrance. Inside, the heat presses down like a physical weight. Louis looks at the small patch of sky visible through the mesh roof and forces his breath into rhythm. In, out, in, out. The same rhythm he once used to keep pace on the track. For interrogation, they are brought to a wooden hut where an officer waits behind a low table. He asks again about their mission, their aircraft, the location of their base. When Louis refuses, the officer smiles faintly and nods to the guard. A length of rubber hose appears, the kind used for engine maintenance. Louis braces as it comes down across his back. The pain is deep, stunning, sharp. He counts each blow silently. 15 strikes in, his vision blurs. 20, and he can no longer feel his hands. At 30, the officer signals to stop. Louis's body trembles uncontrollably, but he forces himself upright. The guard watching him pauses, something like reluctant respect flickering across his face. They return to the cage each night, half conscious, half starved. Phillips mutters in his sleep, dreaming of the cockpit and clear skies. Mac barely speaks. Louis, lying on the ground with his head against the bamboo, listens to the rustle of palm fronds above and wonders whether anyone back home knows they are still alive. One morning, a guard hands him a scrap of paper. It's a questionnaire. English words printed neatly. "If you cooperate," the guard says in halting speech, "you will be treated well." Louis looks at it. The questions ask for military information, coordinates, squadron names. He tears the paper in half, slowly, deliberately. The guard's expression hardens. That night they are denied water. Weeks pass. The men grow weaker, their skin stretched over bone. Every day the same routine. Roll call, interrogation, beatings, a single rice ball. But Louis refuses to break. Somewhere deep within, the stubborn runner still lives. The one who once promised himself he'd never stop until he crossed the finish line. And then, one morning, a new sound cuts through the oppressive stillness, the distant whine of engines. Aircraft. American? No, Japanese. The camp explodes into activity. Louis and the others are blindfolded, hustled to the pier, and thrown onto a transport ship. Destination: Japan. As the ship pulls away from Kwajalein, Louis stands chained on the deck, watching the ocean he once drifted upon now receding into the distance. The irony isn't lost on him. The same water that nearly killed him has now become the barrier between freedom and hell. The sun dips low over the Pacific. The guards chain the prisoners in pairs, forcing them below decks once more. The air is foul, the darkness complete. Louis closes his eyes and whispers to himself, not a prayer, but a promise. "I survived the sea," he murmurs. "I'll survive this too." He doesn't yet know the name of the man who will haunt him next. A sadistic guard, known to prisoners simply as the Bird. August 1943. The air at Omori prison camp outside Tokyo stinks of sewage and coal smoke. The place sits on a reclaimed spit of land, a man-made island stitched to the city by a causeway of filth and mud. Rows of bamboo barracks sag beneath endless rain, their tin roofs hissing as drizzle turns the earth below into slick black soup. For the men who live here, this is the end of maps. A place where the war doesn't rage in the sky or sea, but in silence, in humiliation, in the slow undoing of dignity. When Louie Zamperini steps through the gates of Omori, he's no longer an airman. His name is stripped from him, his uniform long since rotted away. In its place, a single number stenciled in black ink, 586. The guards shout commands in sharp, guttural bursts. Prisoners march in rows of 10, shuffling in worn clogs across the muck. The wind carries the echo of Tokyo in the distance. Factory horns, the rumble of trains, life continuing beyond the wire. Louis glances at it once, the faint skyline of a city he'll never see free, and then lowers his eyes. Looking too long invites punishment, and punishment has a name. Mutsuhiro Watanabe. The men whisper it with dread. The Bird, young, educated, from a wealthy family. Yet in him, cruelty burns like a need. He appears without warning, his boots soundless on the wet ground, his uniform immaculate. His eyes are not wild, but precise, studying his prey the way a falcon sizes its next kill. When he sees Louis for the first time, he stops, tilts his head, and smiles faintly. "So," he says in broken English, "the famous runner." He has already heard of Zamperini, the Olympian who raced in Berlin. Pride is dangerous currency in a prison camp, and Louis's reputation is a provocation he cannot hide. The Bird circles him like a collector admiring a rare find. Then, without warning, he slaps him hard across the face. Once. Twice. Louis staggers but doesn't fall. "You will learn respect," the Bird says softly, almost tenderly. "Here, you are nothing." From that day forward, Louis becomes his target. Every morning inspection, the Bird finds him, striking him with a bamboo stick for standing too slowly, kicking him for not bowing low enough. Once, he forces Louis to hold a heavy wooden beam above his head, arms trembling while the entire camp watches. "If you drop it," the Bird says, "I will beat you until you die." The sun climbs higher. Sweat drips into Louis's eyes. His shoulders shake. His breath breaks into ragged gasps. The other prisoners look away. They've seen this too many times. Minutes stretch into eternity. Somewhere inside his skull, Louis retreats, back to the track, to the pounding of feet, to the roar of a crowd in Berlin. The rhythm saves him. One more second. One more breath. 2 hours later, he's still standing. The bird's face twitches, a flicker of frustration. Louie's eyes lock with his, unbroken. In that moment, something primal passes between them, a war of will stripped of uniforms or orders. When the bird finally screams and storms away, Louie drops the beam and collapses into the mud, his chest heaving, but his pride intact. That night, under the low whisper of rain on tin, other prisoners gather around him. They don't speak much, just nods, quiet respect. In a place built to break men, one man's endurance becomes a kind of rebellion. Days blur into months. The camp routine is mechanical cruelty. Dawn roll call, forced labor, beatings for imagined infractions. Louie hauls coal and sewage, shovels mud, carries timber. His body wastes away, but his mind sharpens, focused entirely on survival. He learns how to hide food scraps under his shirt, how to steal sips of water from barrels, how to avoid the bird's eyes without seeming to cower. At night, he listens to the distant hum of B-29 bombers overhead. The guards tense whenever they pass. Japan's sky no longer theirs. The prisoners trade rumors like currency. The Americans are advancing. The Philippines have fallen. Tokyo is burning. Hope, once a dangerous illusion, becomes something they whisper into their sleeves when the guards aren't listening. But the bird senses it too, and the more desperate Japan grows, the crueler he becomes. One morning, Louie is dragged to the parade ground in order to stand in a line with other prisoners. Each is told to strike him in the face. 50 men, one after another. If anyone refuses, they'll be beaten twice as hard. Louie braces himself. The first blow lands, a trembling hand, almost apologetic. The next comes harder, then harder still. Blood trickles down his chin, his vision blurs. He loses count after 30. When it's finally over, he's left kneeling in the mud, face swollen, eyes nearly closed. The bird watches from a few paces away, arms crossed, satisfied. Louie lifts his head just enough to meet his gaze, not in defiance, but in quiet survival. And for a moment, the bird looks unsettled. That night, Louie dreams of running again. His legs strong, his lungs full, the finish line rising before him. Then the dream shatters into the sound of guards shouting. The next day, he's told he's being moved. A new camp, a colder place. He doesn't yet know it, but Omori was only the beginning. The next destination, Naoetsu, will test the last fragments of his humanity. Winter, 1944. Snow falls over Naoetsu in slow, deliberate sheets, muting the landscape into shades of gray. The camp lies along the Shinano River in northern Japan, a bleak collection of wooden barracks ringed with barbed wire and watchtowers. The air smells of coal dust and frozen mud. For men already hollowed by hunger and disease, the cold is another enemy. Quiet, merciless, and everywhere. When Louis Zamperini steps off the transport train, he is gaunt, half-starved, and covered in lice. The guards shout and shove the prisoners down the platform, their boots crunching over ice. His breath leaves a ghost in the air with each exhale. He looks around, searching the faces of the Japanese officers waiting near the gate. And then he sees him. The bird. Mutsuhiro Watanabe stands there, immaculate as ever, a fur-lined cap pulled low over sharp eyes. His lips curl into something between a smile and a sneer. "Welcome back," he says in English. Louis's stomach drops. Whatever faint hope he had of being sent somewhere kinder evaporates. Naoetsu will not be his reprieve. It will be his crucible. The bird wastes no time. From the first morning, the punishments resume. Louis is forced to bow repeatedly until his back aches, to shovel snow until his hands split and bleed. When he slows, the bird strikes him with a kendo staff, precise, methodical blows that raise welts like ropes. Louis learns to brace for impact, to shift his weight so that bones don't break. Pain becomes predictable, almost rhythmic. The work details are brutal. Prisoners haul sacks of coal twice their weight from rail cars to barges on the frozen river. The men stumble and fall, black dust staining their faces. Louis, dizzy with malnutrition, still forces himself forward, counting steps like he once counted laps on a track. 50 steps, rest. 50 more. It's the only way to make it through the day without collapsing. Sometimes, when guards aren't watching, villagers on the far bank glance toward the camp. Women hang laundry or carry water, pretending not to see the skeletal men laboring beyond the wire. Once, a young girl tosses a small potato across the fence when no one is looking. Louis pockets it, heart hammering, and shares it that night with 2 other prisoners. A rare act of grace in a place that seems built to erase it. At night, frost creeps across the barracks walls. The men huddle together for warmth, blankets thin as paper. Louis's body shivers uncontrollably, but his mind refuses to drift. He repeats small mental exercises. Math problems, fragments of Shakespeare, the exact steps of his 1936 Olympic final. Anything to remind himself he still exists beyond this camp, beyond this number. Then comes the water treatment. One morning, the bird orders Louis to stand beneath an outdoor spigot. A bucket of icy water is poured over his head, again and again, while the wind cuts through him like knives. His uniform freezes stiff against his body. Guards laugh, smoking cigarettes, their breath fogging the air. Louis clenches his jaw and focuses on a single point on the horizon. A mountain, dark against the winter sky. If he can fix his eyes on that, he can endure anything. Days later, he's ordered to clean the pig pen, a punishment reserved for those the bird wants to humiliate. The stench is overwhelming, the mud slick with filth. Louis works silently, shovel in hand, refusing to give the bird the satisfaction of seeing him break. When he finishes, he stands before the officer, filthy but unbowed. The bird strikes him across the head with his belt buckle, leaving a long red gash. Blood trickles down his neck, freezing as it falls. Louis doesn't flinch. That night, the men whisper in the dark. Rumors swirl that American planes have reached the Marianas. Tokyo has been bombed. Japan is losing. For the first time, hope is not a distant mirage, but a possibility. Louis clings to it, fragile as it is. And then, proof. In late spring, B-29 bombers begin roaring overhead almost daily, their contrails slicing the sky above Naoetsu. The guards run for cover. Sirens wail. The prisoners, though forbidden to look, risk glances upward. A silent, electric recognition of the world beyond their fences. Louis watches the bombers through slits in the roof, his heart pounding with something he hasn't felt in 2 years. Triumph. The bird, sensing the shift, grows more erratic. He strikes without reason, punishes without pattern. Once, he storms into the barracks at midnight and orders every man to stand outside barefoot in the snow until dawn. Another time, he beats Louis so savagely that the other prisoners have to carry him back to his cot. Yet still, somehow, Louis lives. By July 1945, rumors become certainty. The guards' discipline begins to fracture. Officers disappear. Orders grow confused. Then, one morning, the bird is gone. No announcement, no farewell. Just gone, vanished into the mountains. Louis feels no joy at first, only disbelief. The silence he leaves behind feels heavier than his presence. Days later, American planes sweep low over the camp, dropping food, medicine, chocolate, and cigarettes. Men weep openly, clutching their rations as if afraid they'll vanish. The war is over. When the gates of Naoetsu finally open, Louis stumbles out into sunlight, 66 pounds of bone and willpower, eyes sunken but alive. He looks up at the sky, blinking against its brightness, and lets the warmth touch his face. For the first time in over 2 years, he is not afraid. He has survived the crash. He has survived the sea. He has survived the bird. But survival, he'll learn, is only the beginning of what it means to be free.